Welcome to the final video in my series exploring the prophet and the queen. I'm Todd Newman, and today I want to discuss one of my most important narrative decisions, telling significant portions of the story through the eyes of Baruch, Jeremiah's faithful scribe. In the biblical account, Baruch appears primarily as Jeremiah's amanuensis. That's a fancy word for literary assistant. And of course, he's the one who writes down the prophet's words when Jeremiah himself is imprisoned. The Bible tells us he was the son of Neriah and brother of Suriah, who served in King Zedekiah's court. So clearly he came from a notable family, and he probably had enough wealth to be able to accompany the prophet. But beyond these sparse details, Baruch remains a shadowy figure. What fascinated me about Baruch was his unique position. Here was someone who wasn't a prophet himself, yet he dedicated his life to preserving a prophet's words. Someone who witnessed the unfolding of divine purposes without directly receiving revelation. Someone who chose loyalty to an unpopular truth rather than an easier path. So, in this passage from the book, we see Jeremiah through Baruch's compassionate but clear eyed perspective as Jeremiah's mental state begins to decline. His mental state remains reasonably stable, if such a word applies to a prophet of the God. From my reading of various prophetic writings, many to most of our prophets have been strange characters. The impending Babylonian threat hasn't worsened his usual anxieties, though he still mutters constantly about conspiracies and betrayals. I've learned to distinguish between his prophetic utterances and these personal grievances. The God's words carry a different weight, a resonance that ordinary delusions lack. This dual viewpoint creates a narrative tension I found extraordinarily valuable. Jeremiah experiences events through the lens of divine revelation, sometimes perceiving patterns and meanings others can't see. Baruch, however, experiences the same events as a loyal but ordinary human being, often struggling to reconcile the prophet's words with the messy realities around them both. I wanted Baruch to voice questions readers themselves might ask. And oftentimes that was a useful thing that I found Baruch doing in the narrative. Historically, scribes like Baruch were far more than mere copyists. They were educated elites who preserved cultural memory, interpreted texts, and often served as advisors to those in power. Their role in transmitting ancient wisdom cannot be overstated. It's kind of interesting to think that without generations of faithful and often completely overlooked scribes, we would have no Bible, no Homer, no Gilgamesh. There's something profoundly moving as well about this act of faithful recording and transmission. Baruch didn't know that the words he was carefully inscribing would still be read thousands of years later. He simply performed his duty with diligence, trusting their importance beyond his own understanding. What a powerful lesson for all of us. This brings me to what I believe is one of the novel's central themes, the power and importance of witnessing. Baruch witnesses Jeremiah's prophetic ministry, his suffering, his faithfulness. Through this witnessing, he becomes more than just a scribe. He becomes a keeper of memory, a testifier to truth. This role is modern parallels. Journalists documenting atrocities, historians preserving uncomfortable truths, ordinary people bearing witness to injustice all carry forward this essential tradition of seeing clearly and recording faithfully, often at personal cost. Another aspect of Baruch's story that fascinated me was his experience of exile. Unlike Jeremiah, whose prophetic calling provided a framework for understanding these events, Baruch had to make sense of the national catastrophe without direct divine guidance. His struggle to maintain identity and purpose in a hostile foreign land resonates with refugee experiences throughout history. And by including Baruch's perspective alongside Jeremiah's, I hope to create a richer, more textured narrative that honors both prophetic insight as well as ordinary human faithfulness. Baruch's voice offers readers an accessible entry point into an otherwise overwhelming spiritual landscape. There's a sense in which we are all Baruchs rather than Jeremiahs, witnesses rather than prophets, called to faithfully record and transmit truths entrusted to us, even when we don't comprehend their ultimate purpose. Baruch's story reminds me that seemingly small acts of fidelity, like writing down words, preserving memory, standing by truth tellers, can all have impacts far beyond what we might imagine. And maybe we'll find in this faithfulness our own voice, our own calling, as we saw in the novel with Baruch, because gradually we notice that he realizes that his thoughts are part of the narrative and not just connectors to tie one segment from the prophet to another. At this point, it also becomes his ministry. This concludes my series exploring the prophet and the queen. I want to thank you for joining me on this journey through the creative process behind the novel. My hope is that these insights have enriched your understanding of the story and perhaps inspired you to explore this fascinating historical period further. The Prophet and the Queen is available now from Desticciato Books, and you can buy it on Amazon. Thank you for watching.